Good morning, everybody. My name is Karen Hall from Population Health Collaborative, and I would like to welcome everyone to our PHC webinar. Today we have Grassroots Gardens, Western New York. Grassroots Gardens, Western New York is a determined group of activists who enable community-led efforts to create and maintain community gardens in Buffalo and Niagara Falls. There are 109 gardens in our network this season. Their gardens beautify blocks, grow healthy food, and strengthen neighborhood spirit. They collaboratively cultivate and manage more than 1 million square feet, and they're still growing, of green space. Our work is rooted in the belief that a garden has the power to transform an urban neighborhood. Our speaker this morning, Jeanette Koncikowski, joined Grassroots Gardens, Western New York, as their executive director in May 2018. She is a longtime community educator and activist, bringing almost 20 years of experience with nonprofit organizations. Jeanette is thrilled to be combining her personal passion for gardening with community development. Jeanette is a graduate of Hutch Tech High School and the University of Buffalo. She received her master's degree in education from Harvard University. She is the proud mother of 2 resilient girls, 2 resilient Shih Tzus, and an ever-growing collection of houseplants and heirloom vegetables in her garden. Before I turn it over to Jeanette, I just wanted to let everybody know that this webinar is being recorded. And if you have any questions, so please enter them into the chat box, and those questions will be asked to Jeanette at the end of her presentation. So Jeanette, thank you very much, and you can take it away.
Good morning, everybody. How are you? I'm just going to take 1 second here to figure out why I can't get the slides to advance, and then we'll get started. Sorry about that technical difficulties. I don't know why they're not advancing. Christina, do you have any insight? Oh, there we go. Okay. So we are going to put a copy of the slides sent to you and post on Population Collaborative Health's website. And again, as mentioned, please type your questions into the chat box, and we'll do a Q&A at the end of the series. So welcome. Thank you so much for coming to the webinar today. Again, my name is Jeanette Koncikowski. I'm the Executive Director of Grassroots Gardens, and this is a webinar about the ways in which the organization is improving public health. Before I move on to the next slide, I'd like you to take a minute to envision your perfect community garden. Think about what sights and smells you see in the garden. Think about who's in the garden, what kind of flowers, what kind of trees, if there's any place for community to be together. I'd like everyone to kind of start with their vision of a community garden. And if you have it in your head, we're going to move on, and I want to show you what one of our community gardens looks like. So this is the Cottage District Community Garden, and a lot of people call this the before picture, but I call this day one. So this is a lot on the west side of Buffalo that after years of blight and abandonment, the neighborhood decided to reclaim the lot. And you can see here there's a number of residents starting the cleanup. This took the neighborhood 3 full 12-hour days to clean this lot. I'm going to come back and talk to you more about the history of it, and we'll look at some pictures of the garden now in a little bit. But it's really important to me that when we think about community gardens, do not forget that they often start looking like this. And we're going to talk about how Grassroots Gardens supports the neighborhood in this process. So we are an organization of dedicated activists. We really work with community to empower, engage, and transform neighborhoods. For 24 years now, we have been working in the city of Buffalo and more recently in the city of Niagara Falls. So all of our gardens are within city limits. And really we're focused on a couple of different things. We want to reclaim vacant land for valued use in food production and in neighborhood beautification. But more importantly, we want to connect the community to that land and give people a chance to experience growing, whether that's growing food, flowers, or themselves. When Grassroots started, we were led by a group of people that came together to focus on building community gardens in the city. Our founder, Milton Zeckhauser, approached the mayor's office in the early 90s about taking these vacant lots that he saw all over the city and connecting them to communities in need of food. And so for our first 15 years, the organization was fully led by volunteers. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit later about how that shifted in the last 10 years and what that's meant for our ability to impact health. So in order to kind of understand our impact on health, I want to take a few minutes to share what we specifically do. And this is a picture here of our garden at the Moot Senior Center. It's just opened this past year. So we take a vacant littered lot like this one, which is on the west side at 60 York Street, and we work with the community to change it into a beautiful garden like this. So this is what the lot looks like today. You can see there are some beautiful poppy flowers out front. We've got some pollinator habitat. In the back, I don't know if you could see the bricks there, that's the raised bed for food growing. And then there's a beautiful pathway with ornamental flowers in the back, more food beds, and in the very back, there's a little gathering spot for community. This is another before picture. This is the Pelion Garden at City of Niagara High School. This garden took 4 vacant city lots and today have transformed it into a garden. The garden is used by students on a regular basis, but also by their parents and community members. The 5th and 6th graders named the garden after Mount Pelion in Greece, where the mythical school mascot, the centaur, lived. In the garden, the kids come out regularly to learn and to study. They're doing an activity here on the left side. They're doing some face painting and I think summertime activities. In the upper right there, they're working on their soil planting and harvesting sunflowers down on the bottom right. So this is a garden in which we're really looking at building sustainable relationships with the community. The garden is used for teaching, it's used for learning. It is one of our 2 gardens that has beehives and mason bees, and so they're doing some work there with the apiaries. So I said earlier that we really focus on 3 main methods: engaging, empowering, and transforming. And I want to touch base on a little bit of how we do that. So this is Gregory. Gregory was a grandfather of a student at Saturday Academy at Drew Science Magnet School that was part of a workshop I led back in December. And he talks about how he had never had a chance to really grow anything. And so when he saw that we were doing a workshop on terrariums, he got excited and asked if he could make one too. And all of our activities with BPS and Saturday Academies are open to the adults as well as the kids. And so in this workshop, we actually, I think, had more adults than kids make the terrariums, take them home. And Gregory decided to give it to his mom for Christmas. We were there in December doing an indoor gardening activity. And so this is one way we engage people in the joys of gardening. We do workshops in the community to invite people to participate and learn something about growing plants. In this case, we had a lot of fun because we made little scenes for dinosaurs and Lego guys and different things like that to live in. And so the kids and the grandparents and parents had a lot of fun with that one. We also are working on, empowering at the community level. So with the gardens in our network, we're really seen as a steward of the gardens. As they mentioned at the start, there's 109 community gardens this season. And so there's only myself and 2 staff. So we're not directly managing those gardens, but we're supporting the gardens. This is a testimony from the Lafayette Community Garden. The Lafayette Community Garden could not be what it is without the support of Grassroots Gardens. Grassroots Gardens provides the soil, the science, the supplies, the seeds. We're key to teaching us how to put our garden to sleep, planting garlic, and much more. This is a quote from Zena at the Lafayette Garden in Newcomers Academy. And at this garden, it's largely the youth that are there are refugee and new immigrant youth who attend the school for new Americans and then participate in the after-school garden club. And also at Lafayette, one of the things that I love about this school garden is that it really is very integrated into the community. And so the principal has a bed there, the teachers have beds there, the kids have beds, the garden club, but also the neighbors. And during the summer, the neighbors come and take care of that garden while the kids are away. And so we're working to empower that garden to be able to be its best self. At a larger level, we're looking at transforming the whole community. And this is a testimony here from Geraldine Wilson, who is a longtime grassroots gardener. I believe she started the garden on Victoria Avenue about 11 years ago. She talks about how it went from an abandoned property to a bountiful garden. When I met Geraldine, she told me that the weeds were so tall she considered them mini trees. And I wasn't able to find any of the pictures she shared. I've seen them at her home where the trees were over the size of the corner street signs. That's how bad the weeds were. And it was a dumping ground for rats, or for couches that brought the rats. And she talks about how the garden did more in 6 months, let alone in 6 years, than she could with her block club, of which she had been the president. It really became a refuge. And so this is a garden that is still in the community. I was actually just there yesterday. Geraldine has recently stepped down as a lead gardener and is actually coming on the Grassroots Gardens team as a consultant with us this year. So we're really excited about that. As we transition the garden to new leadership, we're kind of holding space for it this year by doing some of our program work there. So we have a new program with ARC Erie County. We have some young men with developmental disabilities out to the garden yesterday, working with our garden education coordinator, learning how to plant, learning how to grow. They had fun learning how to turn the fire hydrant on yesterday and water the plants, and we got a wave from the fire department as they rolled by, wondering what we were doing there. So it's a really good way to bring people out and into community, and then to also transform those neighborhoods. This is a neighborhood on the east side of Buffalo that is considered high crime, and yet when we're there, we've always found people coming out, being welcoming, wanting to participate, wanting to see what we're doing. This is a neighborhood that used to have a lot of home ownership that now has more rentals. And so we're looking at, as the population kind of turns over there, how do we continue to engage them to bring them into the garden, even if they only end up living in the neighborhood for 6 months or a year. And so that's one of the ways that we participate in helping to support the gardens while not directly managing them. Every garden is managed by the community members, and that can be a block club, like in Geraldine's case, it was the Victoria Avenue Block Club that started that garden. It can be a church, it can be a school garden, it can be just a group of neighbors on a street that came together that wanted to grow together. So I want to talk a little bit about our methods and how we work. Most people know that we steward community gardens, but often don't know more beyond that. And so specifically, what we're going to do is we sow 5 seeds: the people, the land, the insurance, materials, and skills. And so I want to talk about each of these for a minute. When we're talking about people, we're talking about connecting neighbors to lots, as I said, but really we're also teaching them how to grow, how to become engaged in community work. Very often people will tell me, I'd love to garden, but I don't know where to start. And, you wouldn't want me in your garden. And we always tell people, actually, you're the person we want in our garden. We'd love for you to come learn how to grow with us. And so I'll get to that in the skill building section in a minute, but we're taking people and we're connecting them to the land. The way we facilitate access to land is to kind of act in a couple of different ways. For one way, with the majority of our gardens, probably 75%, we're acting as a leaseholding organization. That means that we are the intermediary for the city government with the neighborhood. So when people want to start a community garden, they come to us. So we consider ourselves 100% mission-led. We do not go into communities and look at a vacant lot and say, we're going to make this a community garden and then we're going to go find some neighbors to participate in it. The community garden won't be sustainable if that's the way it works. We need to have that buy-in from the community right up front. And so what we're looking to do is looking for the people to come to us and say, I've seen these gardens pop up. How can we get one in our neighborhood? And what we'll do is we'll connect them to vacant land. We have access to the city land database. We'll look and see what lots might be near them. Or if there's already a community garden in their neighborhood, we will connect them there. Right now in the city of Buffalo, we're really looking at sustainability with 97 gardens in Buffalo, largely on the east and west side, unless there is some reason that they're not in walking distance to a neighborhood garden already. In that case, we would look at starting a new garden. We are been adding some gardens in South Buffalo. We had some turnover of gardens there. The only areas of the city in Buffalo that we don't have gardens are Elmwood Village right now and North Buffalo, because there's really not been any vacant land in those two areas, although we do have 1 or 2 school gardens in each of those areas. So primarily we're working as a leaseholding agency. The neighbors will come to us, we'll identify a lot, and then in the fall, they are able to apply for our process to become a member garden. They fill out a form that lets us know how many people they're looking to garden with. They let us know, you know, who's going to be leading as kind of the lead volunteer of the garden. They let us know their plans for the garden, whether they want to grow food or flowers. We ask for a minimum of 5 people to be involved in the garden. So in case one person, you know, a year into it decides this really isn't their thing, someone else is going to step in and take those shoes. And then after that, we approach city government in January every year with a list of new lots to be added to our master lease, and then the Common Council approves. So hopefully this coming Common Council session on Tuesday, next Tuesday, we're going to get approval for our 3 new lots to be added for the 2019 year. The other really important function that we provide that most people don't know is that we cover the liability insurance on all the gardens. So we don't want, you know, the gardeners and the neighbors to have to worry about somebody tripping on their lot, something happening, and now they have to deal with a lawsuit. Grassroots Gardens covers the liability insurance for all gardens in our network. We also provide material support. So what we do is we fundraise every year. I spend a lot of my time in the winter writing grants and doing appeals. And then in the spring, we can put out somewhere between $30,000 to $50,000 worth of soil, lumber, seeds, seedlings, and equipment into the gardens. This year, we've had some very generous funding from the General Mills Foundation that's allowed us to put new seed starting stations to the gardeners so they can grow some of their own food or their own seedlings themselves instead of purchasing with us. We also have put in some new accessible raised beds and some beautiful new cedar bulletin boards in the gardens. And then every new garden gets 4 free raised beds and all the soil and compost to get started and their seedlings. And then every year, every garden is also able to apply for support for either soil, lumber, or seedlings, depending on what their needs are. So we try to resource every garden in the network as much as our finances will allow us to do that. And so obviously, the more money we raise, the more we're able to put back into the community. A large part of why we do this is we believe that food should be free. And we want our gardeners not to be burdened with the cost of gardening, you know, of having to go out and buy $3 or $4 seedlings each to be able to grow food. The majority of our gardens are in neighborhoods classified as food deserts, which I will talk about in a little bit. And so we're predominantly working with folks in the city that are low income, and we don't want to pass that on to them. That's something that our organization feels strongly about, is that food should be free, flowers should be free. So we're going to cover those costs. And then finally, the other seed that we're sowing is the skill building. We offer over 100 workshops a year, free of charge, open to all of our gardeners, but also open to the general public. So if you're interested in gardening, even if you live in the suburbs, you can come in and take a Saturday workshop with us and learn everything from seed starting to square foot gardening to keeping bees to harvesting, dehydrating your food, canning, and preserving. We really go through the whole gamut with the growth cycle to teach people how to take care of a garden, how to put it to bed, and then how to start again in the spring. So why do we do this work? We are a social justice organization focused on food security and access, but we're also an environmental justice organization that wants to rectify and take care of the land in a way that it hasn't before in Buffalo in terms of our very industrial history and you know, the number of the lots, all the lots that we're working on, we consider to have some level of pollution and contamination directly in the soil. And so one of our requirements is that everybody has to grow in raised beds that with the lumber that we provide, which is not pressure treated, and we only use organic methods. And so we're really looking on restoring the land and also on food security and access, and then on the joy of gardening. So I want to just go through a couple of statistics related to the public health needs in Buffalo, and then we'll get into how it is that we've made an impact in those areas. So I mentioned that Grassroots Gardens was founded to connect blighted land to communities in need of growing food. And so I want to share a little bit of information with you about our regional food system. The quotes that you're going to see on the next few screens come from the One Region Forward report on growing Buffalo's food system by Dr. Samina Raja and company at the University of Buffalo Food Lab. And Dr. Raja's research had really looked at, Buffalo Niagara as a whole, and what do we know about food and food security in our area. And so one of the things that she looked at was that, most of our region's households struggle to obtain and eat food that is affordable and nutritious. And so we know, for example, that approximately 75% of Buffalo Niagara adults do not consume the recommended serving of fruits and vegetables. Her study also found that 41% of the region's school children participate in the free or reduced cost lunch program. And we know that that's actually much higher for children in the city of Buffalo and in the city of Niagara Falls. With the work we're doing now in Niagara Falls, we're really seeing even greater needs around food security. 70% of Niagara Falls city residents are receiving supplemental food assistance compared to about 50% in Buffalo within the city limits. And so we're really wanting to, even more so in Niagara Falls, look at how we can support food security. One of the things that, we often, when we think about school lunches and the impact on that too, I'm going to talk about this in a little bit with our school gardens, is that we're often talking about heavily processed food that institutions purchase in bulk because it's cheaper, not necessarily because it's healthy for kids. And so I'll talk in a little bit about the school garden impact. We are also, in a region where diet-related diseases are more common in our region than across the rest of the state. 63% of adults in Buffalo Niagara are overweight or obese, and 11% of our population has diabetes. This is directly related to the food that we're eating, and the food that we have access to. So I mentioned earlier, we care about food justice and understanding how our food system interacts with the region's poverty level, and that drives our work in terms of offering solutions. But also, we really happen to like caterpillars, sunflowers, and making bug smoothies with kids. And these are some of the really fun things that we see and do every day in the garden. Down in the right corner there, that is our new bike blender. The kids absolutely love it. We were so glad to have seen this at another event, and the kids pedal power to make a smoothie directly from the garden. We bring in some fresh or frozen fruit, and then they harvest from the garden right at the school and get to have their smoothies right on site. And oftentimes, there's a lot of quarreling about who's going to get to be the one to pedal and who's going to be the one to make the smoothie. So it's another way that we engage with the kids directly in the school gardens and gardening experience. And that's very rewarding for all of us that participate, whether we're volunteers, whether we're parent gardeners, whether we are the staff. So I'm going to start moving into a bit on our impact on public health. Next year, we'll bring our 25th anniversary, and our largest impact in the region isn't land conservation as most people assume it is. It's something called community conservation. This is another picture here of the Victoria Avenue Garden on a day that we had a work day, and this was a volunteer group from the University at Buffalo and also one of the local high schools coming out. And so when we're talking about community conservation, we're really framing it as fearless community conservation. And community conservation is an approach to land conservation that includes more people. Community conservation begins by listening to many different voices in the community and then responding. It uses the strengths of the land trust, which is Grassroots Gardens, to meet the needs expressed by people in the community. So as I mentioned earlier, we're not going into a neighborhood and saying, or to a school and saying, you need a garden here. We are responding to the community's request for that, connecting people with that place, connecting them with other people that can help them achieve their goals for the garden, and then also providing some form of public access. So while we have garden pockets all over the city of Buffalo, and those gardens are being led by the neighborhood, they're also all open to the public. Anyone can come onto the land and enjoy the garden. You don't have to be a gardener there, unless it's a school garden. Some of the school gardens, obviously, for security reasons, are more tucked away. But our neighborhood gardens, of which we have about 79 this year, those are all fully open to the public, and we want to invite people in. So for our first 15 years, I mentioned that we were all led by volunteers, and we stayed pretty stable. For 1995 to 2010, we had about 30 gardens in our network, and every year the gardeners came together, and Grassroots really kind of acted as that organization that was the gel for the community gardens. We stayed pretty stable over that period of time. In 2010, the shift happened in that we were able to start adding professional staff. We started with one part-time executive director that rolled into another part-time executive director, eventually to a full-time executive director, and then adding some program staff. So with that came the growth in the gardens at the same time, as we had staff that could start focusing on teaching and marketing and communicating about the gardens, and also fundraising for the gardens. We were able to really significantly increase the number of gardens. So this year, just 9 years later, we have 109 gardens in our network. Really, right now, we have as many gardens on the west side as we do on the east side. We were started on the west side of Buffalo, but we actually have more gardens on the east side right now. And then, as I said, we have a couple in North Buffalo, a couple in North Buffalo, predominantly Black Riverside area. North of Hurdle, we don't have as many other than one school garden right now. South Buffalo and along the waterfront, we have a couple of gardens, and then we have 12 this year in Niagara Falls. So earlier I mentioned the work that Dr. Raja at the UB Food Lab was doing. Samina Raja is a former board member at Grassroots Gardens and our longtime program evaluator. Every year, she and her team are in contact with us to see what's happening in the gardens, and every 5 years, they do a formal evaluation of our program. So we're due for one in 2019, and I was just in communication with her the other day about some of the questions that we wanted added this year. This map on the screen is from 2013, a study that she did called Indicators for a Healthy Food and Built Environment in the City of Buffalo. And the blue at that point in time was the quarter-mile access to the community gardens, and the red dots are the rental parcels. And so in 2013, we were already at a level where 1 in 4 renters could walk to a community garden to access food. And because all of the gardens are free of charge, which is really one of the things that makes us unique in the country, many other community garden organizations charge families fees to adopt a bed. So that could range anywhere from $20 a season to over $100 a season, even in this region. I've seen some community garden beds right now out in the suburbs are being charged at like $80 a season. There are absolutely no fees if you are a city resident to participate in our community gardens. We don't charge you any fees, and as I said, we try to do everything we can to support putting money and resources into the gardens. But Dr. Raja's work really was particularly looking at where our gardens were in access to rental housing, because we know in neighborhood where there's greater rental housing, there's also greater poverty. And so we wanted to make sure that where we're expanding, that there are gardens for those that most need access to food. So we had, as you can see on the map, pretty good amount of gardens where there are people renting. And now that we have more than tripled the number of gardens, I'm really excited to see what this map is going to look like in 2019. Another major change for Grassroots Gardens, in a way that we've responded through community conservation to the city's needs, is by becoming a land trust. In 2016, we recognized as an organization that Buffalo was going through a time of reuse and redevelopment and redesign. And while this is all really exciting, we know that with development can come gentrification, loss of affordable housing, and loss of green space in predominantly low-income neighborhoods. So the board of directors and the gardeners had the foresight in 2016 that this could happen in Buffalo, and decided to, for the first time in its history, change the way Grassroots Gardens operated. So while we still predominantly are a leaseholding organization, in 2016, we purchased our first 2 gardens, and now that has allowed us to become a land trust. And a land trust essentially means that as an organization, we hold land in trust forever, in perpetuity, on behalf of the community. And at the same time in 2016, we merged with a sister organization in Niagara Falls called Greenprint Niagara, and that expanded our reach into Niagara Falls. And so 2016 was a really big year for Grassroots Gardens. This year, we are working, actually since 2016, we've been working to become the nation's first accredited community garden land trust organization. And we're hopeful that in 2020, our application will go in for accreditation. It's a year-long process that reviews the organization, looking for kind of best practices and ensuring that, you know, we really are complying with the Land Trust Alliance's standards and practices for being a land trust. One of the things that this has done for the community is allow these gardens the potential to forever be owned by the community. And so what has happened this past year, and I don't know, I joke with people that I started in May 2018, and almost immediately after I took the role as executive director, for the first time ever, the gardens started coming up for sale. People tried to purchase them because they are just listed as vacant lots in the city holdings, but you know, if you go by them, you'll see that they're community gardens. And despite people seeing and recognizing that they're community gardens, people try to purchase them. We were very thankful for our leadership in City Hall with the Common Council. In every case, we had 3 cases last summer where public city lots came up for sale. Most recently, there was one on Putnam Street in which the garden lot there is very narrow. It's on the west side of Buffalo. It's a very narrow lot. It's too small for a regular house to be built. Someone tried to purchase it and get a variance to develop what they said was a tiny apartment complex. And thankfully, again, the neighborhood and the community and the gardeners really rallied very quickly and responded, in this case with a letter writing campaign to the couple that wanted to buy the garden. And we were really blessed in that once the couple recognized it was a community garden and they heard the impact of the loss on the community, they immediately dropped their interest in the sale and moved on, looking at other vacant lots. And so while we've been able to intervene each time as advocates, I know we're going to get to a point in probably not the far off distant future where there's going to be too many lots coming up for sale. And so that's why the land trust is important. It allows us to purchase those lots ourselves and hold them forever under the organization. Now, that doesn't mean that we change the management structure. The gardens are still managed by the community. We just hold them in trust as the title holders, and they're still controlled by the community. And it's really the best way to protect a garden. And so we're working with the gardeners now on Putnam Street to be able to eventually purchase that lot and bring it into the land trust. And I assume we're going to be doing this with more lots in the future. Our goal is to be able to have at least one garden in each of the Common Council districts, so that there is going to be access at all times to a garden to be able to grow food for people that need it. Another impact that we have on public health is feeding children, adults, and seniors. And so I want to go through a little bit of our data on what we know about our impact related to fighting hunger. So Dr. Raja's research on Grassroots Gardens has found that for every one gardener, 5 people in the family are eating the harvest. As mentioned at the very beginning, we now have over 1 million square feet of growing space in the capacity of the raised beds for growing food. 90% of our gardens are growing food, and 75% of those gardens are within neighborhoods classified as food deserts, meaning there is not an easily accessed supermarket versus a convenience store within a 2-mile radius. And so the gardens are really meeting a crucial need for free, organic, fresh produce. Over 30,000 pounds of fruits and vegetables are harvested annually from the gardens. Our top crops are collards, tomatoes, and peppers, but we also have some folks growing very culturally specific crops like Nepali eggplant and bitter gourd, which can be grown here. We are really focused on community-controlled agriculture and then working with the community around creative strategies to combat these food deserts, also sometimes termed food apartheid, which I think is an even better way of looking at it. I believe that term was coined by Leah Penniman, who's the author of Farming While Black, and she's talking about how there are very structural and systemic programs put into place to prevent our poorest neighborhoods from having access to food. And we really are setting up an apartheid system of the haves and the have-nots around food. So when we look at food in relation to the school gardens directly, some of our data, so in the last, since the last 6 years, we've had an increased number of school gardens. We went from 5 school gardens, which is this chart on the left, which came, or I'm sorry, on the right, which came out of Dr. Raja's Healthy Indicators report. At that time in 2013, there were only 5 school gardens, and she was recommending an increase by 3% before the next study in 5 years. We've actually created a 6-fold increase in 7 years now for school gardens. So we went from 5 school gardens to 30 this year. 27 of those are in the city of Buffalo. I'm sorry, 27 of those are in the city of Buffalo and 3 are in the city of Niagara Falls now. I also wanted to show you some data that we have here. This was from a policy brief, an article that was put out from a research fellow, Jessica Gilbert, at the Partnership for Public Good. And she did an examination of the transition to good food purchasing in the Buffalo public school system. In her study, she was looking at how school-based food systems are, whether they are democratic, whether they are decentralized, whether they support a diverse economy, whether they decrease consumption, and then also how they redistribute power and resources. And so on this chart, she's looking at some of the different food systems within the schools. One is the National School Lunch and School Breakfast programs, and she looked at that specifically in Buffalo. And as you can see here, her study indicated that, there's not really been democratization of the school lunch program. It's not decentralized, and it's not redistributed resources and powers. She also looked at the backpack program, which had similar mixed results, and the school pantry program, which also has yes and no results. Where we do see across the board attention to these issues, though, are in 2 of the initiatives that we are involved in. One is Farm to School. The Buffalo Public School got a grant a few years ago to start a Farm to School initiative, and Grassroots Gardens was part of that. And so, as you'll also see on the bottom line there, the Buffalo School Gardens are working hard, and what they found in the study is that the school gardens and Farm to School really are democratic. They're centralized support of a diverse economy. They're increasing decreasing consumption of processed foods and increasing fresh fruits and vegetables, and they're redistributing power and resources because they put the tools for food growth back into the hands of the people. So that's the students, the parents, the principals, the teachers. And we're really excited to be a Farm to School partner, and also with our Buffalo School Gardens really focusing on bringing in both academic growth. So we have different curriculum with kids where sometimes teachers will bring them out to the garden to do math lessons, and they will count beans as math. We're also doing community building. We're having the kids come out and work with neighbors in the gardens, and then also encouraging healthy lifestyle. Many of the students that we work with often can't, for example, differentiate things like a peach from a plum. And so they learn in the garden what those differences are. They learn about heirlooms, they learn about tomatoes, they learn about how to pickle. We make salsa with them. They get a chance to really experience firsthand what fresh food looks and feels and tastes like. And if you've ever had a child that's gardened with you, you know your kid's not going to eat something that you bring home from the grocery store like kale, but if they're growing that kale in a little paper cup and they take it home and they plant it in the garden or in the community garden, they're watching it grow and they're nurturing it, they're going to eat that kale. And so the gardens are really a way to increase the healthy foods that kids and youth are eating. Kind of starting to move into wrapping up here, talking about the other major public health impact is creating next generation environmental leaders. So these are 2 shots of 2 of our school gardens. On the left is the Universal School. They're doing a seed starting activity that day. And on the right is some of our youngest gardeners at, I believe that's at Montessori. They are very much enjoying getting out and digging in their school garden there. So when we're talking about how we're creating leaders with the school gardens, as I mentioned, the kids are out here being the ones that are doing the growing, but they're also learning a lot more than how to grow food. We spend time talking about caring for the earth. We spend time talking about pollinators and native plants, how to do composting. The kids get to participate in programs like vermicomposting. And so they're really learning from preschool ages in our gardens how to take care and nurture the earth, how to take care of the land. So it's a lot more than gardening. They're really focused on becoming our next generation of environmental leaders. We have workshops on everything from composting to pollution prevention, soil health, native plants and pollinators. We also have a program for older youth. We have a partnership with Groundwork Buffalo and Field and Fork Network, which is a youth program to teach college-age youth how to construct and run their own market garden, with the hopes that this is a job skill that they might be really interested in having and go on to work in an urban farm or landscape design, something like that. And so we do have a number of other grant-based programs in addition to the gardens that are teaching kids and youth how to be in relationship with the environment. The fourth major impact on public health is really looking at regional revitalization and community capacity building, because we know that when cities are healthier, the communities are healthier. And so the way we do that is we're really focused on, not only teaching people how to grow food, but teaching people how to advocate for themselves. So some of our workshops in our workshop series are actually not about gardening. We teach how to fundraise. We teach how to advocate to your council member. We're working in partnership around different trainings with other partner organizations on racial equity and food justice systems. And so really involving the community at that level and not seeing it as, we have something to teach the gardeners, but also they have something to teach us. And our gardeners in this picture are often the people that are leading our workshops, and we try to elevate them to expert trainers because they have the knowledge and the skills and they can teach each other. Again, we're just there to kind of facilitate that process. And in terms of regional revitalization, Grassroots Gardens, with having 109 gardens, we have over 100, those are on over 160 vacant lots that were formerly blighted properties that are now changing the neighborhood. And Dr. Raja's data has also suggested that if there's a community garden in a neighborhood, the crime goes down, happiness goes up. We know that a number of our gardens actually started as a response to community-based violence. We have a garden on the east side on Cambridge Avenue that was started by a group of women on the street following some gang violence, in which one young man actually died in the arms of one of the older women on the street. And she, as kind of the community elder, said, enough is enough, and decided that instead of this lot where the youth were congregating and there was a lot of violence happening, they were going to take charge of it. They were going to be out there every day. They turned it into a garden. And as she talks about in her story, the dope dealers leave. When they see people out there harvesting zucchini, they leave. Or oftentimes what happens is those same youth that were previously involved in violent activities are now coming in and are curious. They want to learn. They want to do something else. And so the gardens provide an opportunity to revitalize and regenerate and restore. And that's really our focus on restorative justice, is how can we use these built environments in this green space to engage communities. So we're providing food, we're providing capacity building, we're really letting the community lead. Again, we're just the facilitator. So real quick, I just want to finish up and then we'll have some time for questions and answers. Two new initiatives we have this year that are related to public health that anyone on the webinar is welcome to join us in if you're interested. One is our Gardening for All initiative. When I was at Geraldine's Garden on Victoria Avenue, right after I started, I came over to inspect a concrete pad we had put in for a wheelchair accessible raised bed, and we weren't sure we did it right. And so we had someone from Western New York Independent Living come out and look at the wheelchair pad. And he said, oh yeah, this is fine, but here's like 30 other things in this garden that you've probably never considered related to accessibility. And so that got me thinking about how we have 109 gardens, right? So 108 other ones than hers that probably needed those same kind of improvements. And so we wrote a grant and we got a new state grant this year to launch our Gardening for All initiative. It's a task force, a community-led task force. Geraldine Wilson is actually going to be leading it for us. She has herself struggled with her own health in the garden and safety issues, as she is both legally blind and has been a wheelchair user in the past and had mobility needs. And so the task force is going to be led by Geraldine and involve a number of other grassroots gardeners that have adaptive needs, but also the community as a whole and partner organizations like Olmsted Center for Sight and Deaf Access Services. We, 2 weeks ago, had our first ASL-led training. And so, you know, we recognize that if we're only providing training in English, we're missing a large part of the Buffalo population. And so one of the things we're looking at doing differently is offering trainings in American Sign Language, offering trainings in many of the other languages that our community speaks. And so that's one of our new initiatives for this year. The other one is our therapeutic community gardening initiative. We've been talking about kind of the public health impact from a very physical standpoint in terms of physical health, but the gardens can also play a really big role in emotional health. And over when I toured the gardens last season, in my first year, I heard people tell me about the sacredness of the soil, and they would talk about what the land meant to them and what the gardens mean to them, and how much better off their depression was because of the garden, or how supported they felt when previously we had, you know, someone elderly on the street that was kind of a shut-in because she didn't feel safe in the neighborhood, now is coming out to the garden and has met friends and neighbors there. And so the gardens have always kind of been used in a therapeutic sense, but we're looking at making more of an expressly direct mental health intervention in the garden. And so this is another new working group we've started to explore the ways in which we can have a mental health intervention connected to the gardens. And so if anyone is interested in joining either of those initiatives, feel free to email me or learn more. I'm just going to wrap up here by putting up our contact information. You can learn more at grassrootsgardens.org. Feel free to email me anytime at director@grassrootsgardens.org. Our office number is up there. You can also follow us with the handle GGWNY on Twitter and Instagram, and if you search Facebook for Grassroots Gardens. We are going to turn it over now to taking questions.
Thank you so much, Jeanette. That was incredible. Does anybody have any questions or comments for Jeanette? You can just type it in the chat box. We do have one. Who are some of your more active partner organizations?
Great question. I always joke because we have so many partner organizations, it's almost getting to the point where we probably need to start doing better at saying no to people. Major partners, longtime partners include the Massachusetts Avenue Project. They have been for probably almost 20 years, a longtime partner of Grassroots Gardens. We do a lot of different grants with them right now. We have, we're subcontracting with them on a USDA grant where we are starting new market gardens in Buffalo, and so that's one of our other grant-based programs. This year we also have partnership, as I mentioned, with Field and Fork Network, which connects farmers to different advocate groups, and also Groundwork Buffalo. They're working together on an urban youth agriculture development program. Obviously, we have major partners in the city government, so City of Buffalo and City of Niagara Falls. We work with them on everything from creating the master leases to approving the new gardens. In Niagara Falls, they've asked us to participate at a policy level in helping to redraft some of their laws, which are pretty outdated. So, for example, Niagara Falls rain barrels are still illegal. There is no green code like there is in the city of Buffalo. And so we really are looking forward to partnering with them and giving some input as they draft those new policies. We also have, you know, major community partners in the number of churches that garden with us in community organizations. So we have gardens at like Westside Community Services, St. John's Church, First Presbyterian Church, St. James Church in Niagara Falls. And so those community partnerships are obviously very important for us. And then, you know, Dr. Raja at the UB Food Lab has been our longtime evaluator, but the UB Food Lab as a whole, we have a lot of students that we work with. University at Buffalo also largely as a whole. We were very grateful this year. We had 3 different student projects completed over the course of last semester. We had a group of sophomore students that did an oral history project and cataloged kind of the history of the gardens for us. We had another graduate group that made Salesforce for us to work on our fundraising system. We had another group with the environmental engineers that built some rainwater collection stations for us. So the university's been a major partner too. But also we work with funders like the Land Trust Alliance to really expand our push in the region and our presence in the region. And then locally funders like the United Way of Buffalo and Erie County, which fund about 20% of our programs.
Thank you. Are there any more questions for Jeanette? Okay, well, I don't see it coming through, so I just wanted to give a big thank you to Jeanette for giving this wonderful webinar today. I know that I certainly learned a lot, and I'm sure others did as well. And thank you to everyone for joining us on the call today. You will be receiving a survey right after this webinar, so please take a couple minutes to fill out the survey. We would really appreciate that. And if you wanted to share this with anybody, you can share the link on our YouTube page. This will be uploaded by tomorrow. It usually takes about 24 hours to do. So that is it. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you, everybody. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you.